35 years, which is amazing. And then just the volume you've done over those years is pretty astounding as well.
Probably a little over $1 billion of 7A financing.
You got to be careful about stretching the Adbacks to make a deal cash flow.
I always say year-to-dates can kill a deal, but again, the key is
Welcome to SBA University Special Lesson Edition. I've got a guest professor here, the legend Mike Ramsey from T-Bank. How you doing today, Mike?
doing great. It's great to be on your YouTube
I
channel.
appreciate it. I know I kind of had to drag you in here, but
Yeah.
there's not many people more knowledgeable than you when it comes to SBA lending. We were chatting before. You've been doing it for quite some time,
Yes, been doing it about 35 years.
35 years, which is amazing. And then just the volume you've done over those years is pretty astounding as well.
Yeah, we've probably a little over $1 billion of 7A financing.
$1 billion of SBA
Yeah.
7A financing, which is amazing. So people that are tuning into this video, obviously a lot of them are just wanting to learn the basics. And so I figured, what better person to have on than somebody like you that's kind of seen SBA lending through multiple economic cycles,
Sure.
a lot of changes, but probably the core has remained the same, which is what is a good deal, specifically business acquisition, what makes a good business, what makes a good buyer. So we're really going to focus on that. But thank you for
you're
joining
welcome.
me.
Yeah, great to be here.
So let's start at the top. Obviously, SBA loans, right? Somebody knows they want to buy a business. They might have heard the acronym SBA. I guess, why would SBA be a good option for somebody wanting to buy a business?
Well, I think the best thing about SBA is that it allows a borrower to get an extended period of time to pay back the loan. If someone goes to a bank to buy a business, most likely they're going to get about a 5-year note, probably 20% down. On an SBA 7A loan, we can go 10 years on the business acquisition, and on some cases get by with as little as 10% down. So with your new buyers, it gives them an opportunity to buy maybe a little larger business because the equity requirement will be a little less than it would be if they went through a bank.
Yep.
Another key to that is that, an SBA 7A loan is issued by the bank. With that SBA guarantee, with the SBA guaranteeing 75% of that note, it mitigates the risk for the bank, and the bank is typically willing to make a loan that otherwise they would not make. So it just it opens up an avenue of financing for borrowers that typically would not be there.
Yeah, which is incredible, right? If you think about a business for sale for $2 million, most people think that they're going to have to cut a check for $2 million to buy it, right? So the idea that this lower equity injection is significant because allows people to potentially be able to buy a $2 million business without having to put 50% down, 6% down, as little as potentially 10% of the total project cost. Collateral as well. I mean, talk about, when you're buying a business from a collateral standpoint, there might not be much there. And so conventional lending is typically not going to be an option in those cases.
That's right. An SBA 7A loan will go up to $5 million. Pretty much on SBA 7A, the lender's going to be looking for cash flow. They want to see what the debt coverage will be on that transaction. And because the bank has a 75% guarantee, we will make a loan or you can get a loan with virtually no collateral, just with maybe machinery and equipment, maybe just intellectual property, just goodwill, enterprise value. There's no hard assets in some of these transactions. And because of the SBA 7A program, these banks will make loans like that and not require big down payments or seconds on your homes or other collateral like that.
I like to say cash flow is king in these
Yes,
deals, right?
absolutely.
It's got to demonstrate the ability to pay back whatever the debt's going to be.
Yes.
So let's talk about that scenario. You've got a buyer. They come to you. Hey, Mike, I found this business. Kind of here's the financials. What do you typically look for? What are the main things that, when you get a fresh set of tax returns, you're going towards?
Yeah. The first thing I want to do, I want to look at the numbers. We always ask for 3 years of tax returns from the seller. I want to just take a real quick look at those, make sure that the trends are positive. Or at least stable. I don't want to see a deal that has had declining revenue the last 3 years, because usually that's an indicator maybe why the seller is selling the business.
Yep.
I want to take those numbers and I want to make sure it's stable or improving trends. Then I want to look at the debt service coverage. I'm going to take net profit, add back all non-cash items, and I'm also going to take a look at that owner's salary and see how much that owner's been taking out himself, because maybe our new buyer won't need as much money.
Yep.
And I'm just going to make sure that the deal itself makes sense. And I can usually pencil it out and determine, what an acceptable purchase price would be on something like that. I want to make sure they're kind of all in the same ballpark.
Yep.
So as long as I know the deal's been properly priced and has proper cash flow, then I'll go and look at my borrower.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure, okay, I've qualified the business, the acquisition makes sense. Now, is my applicant a good borrower for this business?
Yeah.
And then I start getting into that part of the equation.
Yeah, I always like to say a business acquisition is like a puzzle, right? You kind of got multiple pieces. You got the business side that you kind of have to put the pieces together, and then you have a buyer side,
Absolutely.
and it's got to all come together. As far as business financials, how far back do you typically like to look?
We look at 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
We concentrate mostly on the most recent 2, and it's easy to say the most recent year holds the most weight, but we collect 3. The most recent 2 tax returns hold the most weight.
Yeah, because you're essentially buying the business as it sits today, right? And the best representation of that is what did it do last year? And then, of course, I mean, the kind of timestamp, we're in April right now, right? So we've got a brand new set of financials, a brand new year-to-date financials. Are there things that you're looking on the year-to-dates that might kind of throw up some red flags, or things that might actually help the application?
Well, I always say year-to-dates can kill a deal, because sometimes they'll really show a big drop in revenue, which might be an indicator that things are not going as we'd like to see. Year-to-dates can hurt a deal, but they usually can't help. In other words, we expect those numbers to look good.
Yeah.
I mean, most sellers aren't going to give you a quarterly statement that looks horrible.
Mhm.
So, but we do, we focus in on those, make sure that they haven't bumped up cost or lowered cost of goods sold. We want to make sure they haven't done anything that from previous years and played with cost of goods sold to make the net income look stronger than it has historically.
Yep. Outside of obviously revenue, kind of the basic add backs, are there other things that you might look on a tax return just to maybe pull out some numbers that potentially could change the deal from a positive or a negative standpoint?
I always like to look at employee wages, and I do a lot of retail deals on gasoline convenience stores. We look at those deals, and we like the deals that have a large corporate overhead, maybe multi-unit operators. They have a pretty heavy staff, which eats up a lot of the SG&A expenses. If they've had a heavy salary, a lot of times we have buyers that are mom and pop operators, can go in there and operate that store with a lower wage multiple.
Yep.
So that's we can look at that deal and say, okay, you've operated stores in the past with $100,000 worth of wages. This store has 200. We can maybe add back some wages there. At the same time, I've looked at other deals where the seller has been, he shows profit, but his wages are nothing because he's been paying people on the side in cash. And we have to go back in and attribute a high salary, a customary salary to that deal, and it doesn't cash flow anymore. So we kind of try to get the full picture on it, but every deal's a little different. Every industry's a little different.
And that's really important. As the lender, you're trying to protect the buyer as well, right? We're doing due diligence to make sure that they're getting an accurate picture of what that cash flow is going to be.
Right.
Because if there's items that are not being represented on the financials, and then they're going to go buy the business, and those expenses are then going to start kicking in. I mean, now that's going to impact their ability to pay back the debt. So that's super important. That's why working with an experienced SBA lender is really important, because they'll dig those numbers out from prior experience. Let me ask you, because one of the things that when I look at a broker listing is what I kind of call the personal add backs, right? The meals, the travel, that type of stuff. What is your approach when you see that there's heavy personal expenses going through the business?
We're not going to add back the majority of what they'll do on their seller's discretionary earnings. So the brokers always put SDE on there. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at that. We're going to add back salary. Probably not medical, because unless it was just a unique situation where their medical expenses are really high. Mm-hmm. We're not adding back boat, travel and entertainment. We're not going to add all that back. Mm-hmm. On a case-by-case basis, we will add back if I've had life insurance where they are funding whole life insurance policies, mm-hmm. cash value life insurance policies that were not necessary. Yep. And there's been times that's been a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 payment, which is smart in some ways because it's a little bit of a tax play. Mm-hmm. We will add that back.
Yep.
But anything else that they try to, meals, entertainment, boat payments, their kids that they didn't show up.
Yeah.
Again, that stuff gets a little. We like to go by EBITDA and then salary adjustments for existing owners transitioning to the new owner,
Yeah.
and see what that number comes in at.
You got to be careful about stretching the Adbacks to make a deal cash flow, because not only do you have to pass the cash flow test, but then a business valuation has to come after that, right? And so the more personal Adbacks that are being built into the valuation, the harder or the more difficult it is going to be for that business to value out, right? Because a third-party business valuation company typically does not do all the personal
No, they
Adbacks as
don't.
well.
No.
And so you've got two parts there. You've got the bank, obviously making sure the business can cash flow the debt, and then a third-party valuation company that also has to essentially let you know whether or not that business is worth what you're paying for it. So now we've got our financials. We like what we see. So now it's time to structure the deal, right? So obviously a business acquisition is not just you're buying a business for $1 million, here's your down payment, and then that's your transaction. Talk about a little bit about what kind of goes into actually building the loan amount.
Well, we're going to determine the total project cost of the transaction. Depending on the industry, we want to make sure we capture the cash cycle and the working capital needs, because the last thing we want to do is have someone take over a business and they open up, the transition happens, and they're short of cash, or an unexpected something happens, and the power goes out and they're closed for a day or something like that. We want to make sure they have plenty of cash to address normal operations, plus if some hiccups happen, that they can handle. So we're going to look at the acquisition costs, factor in working capital, all closing costs. We're going to take that number, that's total project cost, and the maximum we will advance on that is 90%. And if it's like I was saying earlier, if it's a business only deal with only the operating company, 10-year note. If there's real estate involved, preferably if there's 50% or more real estate, they'll get a 25-year note. But we'll and the max we'll advance is 90%. If they want to put more money down, we'll certainly take it.
Sure.
And that'll lower the payment and increase their debt service coverage.
Yeah. That working capital piece is so important. Like you said, when you take over a new business, you're kind of going into a little bit of an unknown, right? You don't know the day-to-day operations just yet. A lot of times the owner walks away if there's receivables. A lot of times they walk away with receivables, right? The cash in the bank account, they walk away with that as well. I always kind of joke, nobody's called me 3 weeks after closing and said, hey, you gave me too much money, right?
No.
But sometimes you might get a call a month later and say, hey, is it possible to get a loan because something unexpected happens?
And that's the worst thing.
And that's heartbreaking
because you
can't
get that
call.
You're sunk.
Yeah.
You can't. It's almost as if you made a loan that's already kind of on the skid. So you can't throw more money after it. So you have to properly ID that deal up front. And see what they need.
And work with a lender that'll properly give you the working capital as well, right? If they're shortchanging you on that piece, then you got to question whether or not they're setting you up to be successful. So super important, the working capital
Absolutely
piece. And obviously the real estate element too, right? You kind of mentioned 25-year term. A lot of times people say, hey, this business, the real estate's for sale. Maybe talk about a little bit of the differences in terms of the equity injection, how that might be impacted by real estate, and then some of the potential add backs with real estate as well, if that's part of the transaction.
Well, if they're sometimes we look at a deal and the seller has owned the real estate separately and they are leasing it from themselves. That's great. When we analyze that transaction, we're going to add back that rent expense that the operating company's been paying. Now, we also want to make sure that that the operating company has been paying taxes and insurance on that building. Because if not, when we underwrite it, if they want to buy that building, we add back that rent, but we have to make sure that the taxes and insurance are covered on that. And in today's environment, especially Texas and all through the South, hazard insurance on commercial property has doubled in the last 4 or 5 years. And that's a very important component to capture, because like you said, we don't want to put someone in a deal. We're not just a transaction oriented. We want customers, and we're not doing anyone any good if they have $250,000 to go acquire a business, if we take all that money, get them in a deal and say, we have you on auto draft, see you later. We got to make sure they're set up to succeed. And that involves identifying all potential costs they're going to come across as they acquire that business.
Flood insurance. Especially if you live in a flood zone. That's a big one. And those aren't cheap policies either. You got to understand kind of what that's going to be from an expense standpoint and identify if that business is paying that expense, right? And if they are, might be prudent to get your own quote, right? To make sure that expense is not going to change too much on you.
And not only get that quote, but get it early. Because those policies sometimes can take 2 to 3 months to be issued. And you enter into a contract to buy that business, and that seller has probably already had some deals maybe fall out.
Mhm.
He's going to want to close.
Yep.
And the last thing they want to hear is we're waiting on the flood insurance to be issued because we can't waive it.
Yep. Which it's a great segue because let's talk kind of the process, right? The timing. So you've got a full financial package. You like the deal. Maybe the buyer and seller, the buyer and seller are under an LOI. You get the application submitted. What's kind of happening behind the scenes as this deal is being submitted into underwriting?
Yeah. Typically, when I look at a deal, I issue the proposal letter. I structure from all the information I've been presented, and we take a deposit and turn it into underwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Our underwriters take anywhere from, I'd say, 8 to 12 business days, depending on the workload,
Mm-hmm.
to get the transaction, the loan underwritten and presented to committee.
Yep.
Everybody's on a very tight timeline. We want to get deals in and out the door as quickly as possible. So we'd like to have a decision within 2 weeks, and then it goes to, upon approval, then it goes to loan closing.
Mm-hmm.
That process right there can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks on average.
Yep.
Now, you can expedite the process. If you're comfortable that the loan, that you'll be approved, we can pre-order appraisals, environmental reports. If there's real estate involved,
Yep.
we can pre-order the real estate appraisal,
Mm-hmm.
the environmental reports. If it's just a business, we can pre-order the business valuation. Well, there's things we can do to make the process go as quickly as possible.
Yep.
But I always say, if you have a very motivated buyer and seller, you can get in and out the door in about 6 weeks.
Yep.
But there's just things happen. UCC filings come up with prior liens that we have to get released from a former lender, just little things like
Tax
that.
transcripts.
Tax
issued.
transcripts. And that's our job. We handle all that,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just little things that come up. So,
Yep.
6 to 8 weeks from start to finish is a pretty good goal.
Yep.
And I think we achieve that on most deals.
Yeah. And it's super important, kind of going back to being an experienced SBA lender, is understanding what a full package is, right? The more complete package you submit to underwriting, the less items that'll have to go back and forth, less questions go back and forth. I think it's really cool that at T-Bank, the underwriter actually gets on the phone with the borrower, right?
Yes.
With the buyer. And I think that's an awesome kind of relationship that can form, and questions can be answered straight from the buyer, right? They can kind of explain why they're interested in this business, why their experience obviously is gonna make it so that they're gonna be successful with this new venture, and that can help speed the process up, because instead of having to email back and forth 10 times to get clarification on questions, it just keeps the process moving. But setting proper expectations as well, right? One of our jobs at the beginning is to kind of give that timeline and let them know, hey, it could be 60 days, barring some unforeseen things, it could be 90 days. Sometimes, if it's real estate, if there's some environmental issues, I mean, it could be, until that gets fixed.
Or construction for 3 or 4 months, depending on how far along they are with their plans and specs and permitting and things like that. But yes.
Mike, I couldn't let you leave. You're actually the master of a very specific type of transaction, and that is C-stores. So convenience stores, gas station combos. Nobody probably has done more than you have. Well, if there is somebody, it's maybe one or two, right?
Yeah.
Since you have done that transaction so many times, for anybody that might be interested in a convenience store, gas station type deal, what are kind of the main things that you would advise them to look for as they're kind of on their search?
Yeah, if you're looking for a gasoline convenience store, first thing I do is just make sure that one of the big boys isn't about to come in the market. Quick Trips, your racetracks, Quick Ways. Some of your big regional firms are, especially in Texas, are all coming here.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot of available product from mom and pop. When I say mom and pop, those people that own 5 or less units.
Yep.
There's a lot of opportunity for them to still acquire good stores and make a very good living. But first thing you want to do is just make sure that there's not one of the big players coming in the immediate area. The unique thing about a convenience store is, if you're going to buy it, you better run it.
Yep.
There's a lot of handling of cash. Even though we're going, moving towards a cashless society, the convenience store industry is still a lot of cash.
Yep.
And a lot of shrinkage.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of product going out the back door. So when you buy a convenience store, you better be on site every day.
Yeah.
And that takes a unique person.
Sure.
I mean, those things are open 18 hours a day. There's a lot of shifts to fill.
Yeah.
So if that's the type of work life you want, they're great opportunities to do convenience stores. When we look at a deal, the first thing we always do is we look at the we get gallonage reports from the gasoline distributors. They're called jobbers.
Yep.
And we always ask for a 3-year jobber report because we want to see the number of gallons sold each of the last 3 years. Has it gone up or down, or is it pretty steady? If it's steady, we love it. The reason you can't just go off the tax returns on the revenues on a convenience store is because the price of gas jumps up and down so much that you could have a $800,000 swing in gross revenue, but it's actually done more volume and has more profitability. And so they're just very unique to underwrite. When the price of oil goes up, margins on gasoline margins go down because they have to raise those prices very quick, and because they're paying quick. Operators make a lot of money when oil's going down because they're slow to lower their prices at the pump. So they're very profitable from that standpoint. What the gas margins, inside sales, we look at that. Want to make sure they're making about 30% on inside. But again, the key is the commitment. I've had people come to me that want to buy a chain of convenience stores, and they think they're going to set up cameras and just kind of manage them from their house and have employees paying $20 an hour. And at $20 an hour, you'll have more beer and wine going out the back door than. So it's a unique business, but it's been, 30 years ago, I've made loans to people that now own distributorship, jobberships and gas. And interesting thing that their kids don't want to stay in the business. Their kids became doctors and lawyers. And so a lot of those stores are coming on the market now. Yeah. But it's.
Yeah. So basically, to sum it up, somebody's interested in buying a C-store. You're the guy to talk to because
we know how to skin it pretty good. Yeah. My underwriter, he and I have done them for 30 years, and we know how to really look at them.
Perfect. So Mike Ramsey, 35 years in SBA lending, over $1 billion in lending over those years. I guess final advice, somebody is looking to buy their first business. What would be kind of a couple pieces of information they should keep in mind as they go on their search?
I'd say first thing, get your personal house in order. And what I mean by that, if we're going to ask for a personal financial statement. If you have any low credit card balances and things pay that stuff off.
Yep.
Because we're going to look at you. First thing, we're going to want to know, how have you handled your personal business? Go out there and go to freecreditreport.com. Look at your credit report. Make sure there's nothing hanging out there, an old apartment lease or something that they dinged you on. Make sure that your credit report's good. We don't make a loan based on someone's credit report. We look at your credit report, and we want to make sure you've handled your business in an appropriate manner.
Yep.
So make sure your credit report's clean. And as far as your cash and savings, make sure that you've had your funds in one account.
Yep.
Seasoned funds. If you know what type of industry you want to go in, adjust your resume to kind of be attractive towards that industry. If you have a skill set that translates good to that industry, explain in your resume what you did at your former job that makes acquiring this new job, a good fit.
Yeah.
So those are just some things. Make sure there's just no, bad credit.
Yeah.
Make sure your resume's in order, and that you really understand the business you want to buy.
Super important. Get your house in order so that it makes you a qualified candidate. Well, Mike, this is awesome. I really appreciate you flying in town in Nashville for this. My first guest on SBA University.
Okay.
It's a prestigious honor. There can only be a first one time.
Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, until next time, class dismissed.
Okay.
Thank you for watching this episode of SBA University. Hopefully you found this episode helpful. If you need to get a hold of me directly, I'll leave my email address down in the description. Be on the lookout as I will be releasing new lessons every week to help you in your SBA journey. Thanks.